What's going on? Welcome back to another episode of the Complete Game Podcast. I'm your host, Casey Guerin. Today, I will be giving you my tight end rankings and tight end tiers. So, if you missed the last episode was my 2020 quarterback rankings, quarterback tiers. I explained who started tiers, who ended tiers, why there's tier breaks, why tiers are important in fantasy football, why my rankings were the way they were, why some players were ranked higher or lower than others. I explained all of those things in the last episode. If you haven't checked that one out, please go look at my 2020 quarterback rankings and tiers before your draft coming up, probably in the next week or so. Maybe the next week, the next 2 weeks before the season gets started here in the first couple weeks of September. So today we're going to go into the tight ends. Like I said, if you haven't listened to that last episode on quarterbacks, please do that. If you haven't, please follow me on Twitter at Casey_G14. Please subscribe to the podcast on iTunes, Spotify. Leave a review, leave 5-star rating, leave some feedback, please. If you ever want to talk fantasy, if you want advice, if you want to ask questions, if you want to debate some players or whatever, please at Casey_G14 on Twitter. Shoot me a message, shoot me a tweet, whatever. We can talk players, we can talk fantasy, whatever you want. And I'm on YouTube as well now. All my podcasts, all these podcasts are also posted to YouTube. The Complete Game Podcast on YouTube. Please subscribe there as well. It's all much appreciated. Please share the episode. Share it with people that you know. I want to get as much fantasy content as I can out there before the season starts here in the next few weeks. Like I said on the last episode, I'm trying to keep the episode short. Last one, I went over 40 minutes on accident. I'm trying to keep them shorter so people can listen on their way to work or whatever. Get that short 20 to 30 minutes of fantasy football content in, get them those rankings, get them that advice, and kind of help them out. So with that being said, I just want to jump right into it so I can get in, give you my rankings, give you my tiers and all those good things, and then get right out so you're not sitting here listening to me talk for 45 minutes to an hour. So I'm going to try and get this done as fast as I can. Just once again, please listen to the last episode. If you haven't, please listen to the ones that will follow this one after the wide receiver running back rankings. I'm going to do some mock drafts, some players to avoid, players to target, things of that nature. So please stay tuned. Please follow me on Twitter. Please follow and subscribe to the podcast on iTunes and Spotify. Please follow and subscribe on YouTube. And like I said, if you have anything you want to ask, if you want any advice, whatever, please don't be afraid to shoot me a tweet, shoot me a message, whatever. So going into the tight end rankings, we're going to start with our tier 1 tight ends. So my tier 1 tight ends, actually, I have 3 of them. So at the top, I have Travis Kelce, number 1. So our tier 1 tight ends are going to be our elite, the best of the best tight ends in fantasy football. The draft pretty early in your draft, set it and forget it kind of guys. You don't have to worry about them at all. So number one ranked tight end, number 1 tier 1, Travis Kelce. So I actually had to look to check, but actually in PPR leagues, which these rankings are for PPR, so Travis Kelce has actually finished the season as the number 1 fantasy tight end 5 seasons in a row now, according to Fantasy Pros. Fantasy finishes. So 5 straight seasons as the number 1 fantasy tight end. The Chiefs didn't add anybody significant other than Clyde Edwards-Helaire, but he's a running back. So Travis Kelce is locked in as the number 1 tight end again. He's still tethered to Patrick Mahomes. Travis Kelce he's approaching the age of 30. I don't see a drop-off anytime soon. I don't see any sort of drop-off. When you finish as the number 1 tight end 5 years in a row, you are going to be ranked number 1 at the top of the tight ends, regardless of age or anything of that nature. The only reason we would see Travis Kelce be ranked any lower is if we saw something this season where his play drops off significantly, which I don't see happening at all. He's still playing at a high level, still has Mahomes, still has Andy Reid, so he's locked in as the number 1 tight end. Number 2 tight end, we have George Kittle. So we've seen George Kittle in back-to-back seasons now in Kyle Shanahan's offense go over 100 targets. And so going into 2020 now, off of back-to-back 100-plus target seasons, Deebo Samuel, broken foot, he's going to be either banged up or out for the first couple weeks of the season. Jalen Hurd, draft pick from last year, wide receiver, out for the year, ACL tear. The only receivers there in San Francisco right now are, I believe, Brandon Ayuk, who's the rookie from Arizona State, Brandon Ayuk, who's a rookie, and we don't expect much from rookies right away, at least in fantasy football. So we have Brandon Ayuk, and they just signed Tavon Austin and J.J. Nelson, two speedster veterans. So what you're going to see in San Francisco is you're going to see them rely extremely heavily on the run game, and you're going to see all the targets go to George Kittle, kind of like 2 years ago. Last year, not this past season, but 2 years ago, kind of George Kittle's big breakout year. He was kind of really the only receiver of consequence on the roster. He was the only receiver that had athleticism, really, other than guys like Marquise Goodwin, but he was injured. But really, George Kittle was the only stable option in that passing game. And in 2020, you're going to see that again. Even when Deebo Samuel comes back from that broken foot, you're not going to see him be 100% healthy until the end of the season. So George Kittle's he's gonna suck up a ton of targets again this year. He's gonna be a target monster. Probably gonna go over 100 targets again. That's why he's locked in as tight end 2. Zach Ertz, I'm locking in at tight end 3 to end the tier 1 elite tight end rankings. Now, some people will tell you and will think that Zach Ertz might not belong here. Some people might tell you it should be Mark Andrews in this tier this year. Some people will tell you that Dallas Goedert is going to take a step forward here. The new receivers in Philadelphia are going to take away targets from Zach Ertz. But as long as Zach Ertz is getting 100-plus targets every year, I'm locking him in the tier 1 tight ends. Zach Ertz has gone 5 straight seasons going over 100 targets. He was about 120 last year, 130 the year before that. So if Zach Ertz is going to command 100-plus targets, I'm going to have him in the tier 1 ranking. And before I get to Mark Andrews to start off the next tier, I just want to say that's kind of the difference. That's why there's the tier break there. That's the difference, that we haven't seen Mark Andrews get 100-plus targets yet, and we haven't seen it over a consistent period of time. So that's why he's not a tier 1 tight end yet. I still have Zach Ertz here. I love Dallas Goedert as a tight end. I think Zach Ertz is going to be on the decline here soon, especially with the addition of Jalen Reagor, Quez Watkins, John Hightower. They've added some weapons in Philly now. Deshaun Jackson's healthy right now. And now that you've seen them add some weapons, Ertz could lose some targets. But if there's a lot of good receivers in the passing game, then that means the offense could be more efficient. If Carson Wentz stays healthy, he loves Zach Ertz. Zach Ertz is going to get targets. And so long as Zach Ertz is getting 100-plus targets in a season, Ertz will be that top tier, in my rankings, tight end 3, that number 1 tight end tier. So going to the tier break now, we're going into tier 2. So tier 2, I have guys that have potential to be tight end 1. Not necessarily the number 1 tight end overall in fantasy. Tight end, I just mean like top 5, 6 guys, those set it and forget it guys. They have the potential to jump into that higher tier, I should say. They could be elite tight ends, but they aren't for whatever reason right now. I just think these guys in this tier had that potential. So where we're going here is Mark Andrews. So Mark Andrews, obviously huge breakout season last year. He had 98 targets, 10 touchdowns. He was huge in the passing game for Lamar Jackson. And everybody with the departure of Hayden Hurst, former first-round pick, is projecting Mark Andrews to have a huge season this year. Mark Andrews should have a great year this year. But I'm not, like I said previously, I'm not ready to put Mark Andrews in that top tier yet, just because all those guys in the top 3 are getting 100 plus, 110, 120 plus targets every season, and Mark Andrews isn't there yet. He didn't break 100 targets last year. Like I said in my quarterback rankings podcast, we could see Lamar Jackson's pass attempts go up this year because of the just defense is trying to stop him from running. You could see Lamar have to pass more this year. And if we do see Lamar take a step forward in the passing game, we do see Mark Andrews on the field all the time. And that's another thing with Mark Andrews is last year he wasn't on the field every single snap. He was splitting time with Hayden Hurst, Nick Boyle. Nick Boyle's still there. And now you should see in 2020, you should see Andrews step up, play more snaps, command more targets. But until we do see that as fantasy gamers, until we do see him for a full season, play the whole year, be on the field every snap, command 100-plus targets, he's not quite in that top tier yet. And we're still not really, I don't want to say that we're still waiting to see Lamar Jackson as a passer, because last year was absolutely incredible. But we are waiting to see when these defenses do dial in on his rushing, can he still win the game as a passer? But Mark Andrews, tight end 4, like there's not much discrepancy there. Tight end 4, he's just not in that top tier yet. Next, Evan Ingram, Darren Waller, Hunter Henry. So Evan Ingram, the only question with him is just his health. Is he going to be healthy? He's one of the most athletic tight ends in the league. He can make big plays happen. The Giants have upgraded their offensive line, giving Daniel Jones more time to throw. Evan Ingram just needs to stay healthy. I still have him included in this tier, ranked 5th overall, because we're going into the season. The projections are I'm not factoring in injuries or expecting injuries. I'm not putting that into the rankings. We're going into the season expecting everyone to be healthy. And if Evan Ingram is healthy, he does have tight end 1 potential. Next, Darren Waller and Hunter Henry. So Waller had a breakout year last year. Waller went over 100 targets. I don't know what Waller's upside is this year because they've added weapons. They have Renfro. They have Tyrell Williams. They added Lynn Bowden Jr. They added some other pieces, Brian Edwards. They added Henry Ruggs in the first round. So now they've also added Jason Witten, which I don't really care about. But they also still have Foster Moreau. So now they kind of have pieces everywhere. I don't think any of these guys are really going to steal a ton of targets. I still think Waller has 100 target potential, but I definitely think the ceiling is a little lower now. But I still think Darren Waller could be a top tight end in fantasy going forward this year just because he's so athletic. He has that rapport with Derek Carr now. Derek Carr loves throwing to the tight ends. We've seen Derek Carr make Jared Cook great again, and now we've seen Derek Carr make Darren Waller great. Derek Carr is not going to take chances down the field. He's going to dump the ball off to Darren Waller this year. So I still think Darren Waller could be a top tight end option this year. And then Hunter Henry, he just needs to stay healthy as well. I think Hunter Henry has kind of been a breakout tight end candidate for years now, and we just haven't really seen it. I still think he has tight end 1 potential. I still include him in this tier, but there definitely is a chance that he could drop to the next tier or drop in the rankings. But for now, I do still have him in this tight end 1 potential tier, especially now. Well, even with Rivers gone, with Tyrod Taylor there, and eventually Justin Herbert, it's still receiver-wise for right now. It's still just Keenan Allen, who is older now, and Mike Williams. But when you switch quarterbacks, you don't know if that quarterback, you don't know who's that quarterback is going to favor. Phillip Rivers, we obviously saw loved Keenan Allen, but with Tyrod Taylor under center, with Justin Herbert, we don't know who's going to get favored. Maybe Hunter Henry is now the favorite target, and with Hunter Henry's athleticism, what we've seen him do in the past, Hunter Henry could be an elite tight end in fantasy football. Let's say Tyrod and Justin Herbert love throwing to Hunter Henry instead of Keenan Allen and Mike Williams. Maybe Hunter Henry can make a huge jump and have that big breakout year this year. So after Hunter Henry, I have a tier break. We're going tier 3. So these are kind of the high floor, low ceiling guys. You kind of know what they're going to give you. They're not going to be the best guys, but you can start them. You're not going to feel really that comfortable about starting them every week. You're not going to feel comfortable drafting them, but I think you can definitely set them in your lineup. So we're going tier 3, high floor, low ceiling. We have Jared Cook, Austin Hooper, Gronk, Hayden Hurst, Tyler Higbee. Just Cook tethered to Drew Brees still. He's going to have those big weeks at home in the Dome. Austin Hooper, I don't like, with no offseason here, Austin Hooper going to the Browns. David Njoku is still there. They drafted a tight end. Austin Hooper, we haven't seen him outside of an environment like Atlanta in a dome with Matt Ryan where he's just getting peppered with targets over and over and over again. I think with Stefanski in Cleveland now, they're going to be a run-heavy team. There's still Odell, there's still Landry there. I don't know what targets there are to be had for Hooper, but Hooper he's a decent veteran. He should be or at least a reliable option, but I don't know what that ceiling is. Gronk back with Brady, and you can't rank Gronk that low. I don't know if the snap share is going to be there for Gronk now that he's older and coming back, and I'm sure they don't want him to play every down and get injured and kind of reflame that injury history. So I don't think Gronk's snap share is going to be there, but he's back with Brady. We have to include him in the top 10 here, or at least I am. I'm including him in the top 10 because it's Gronk and Brady again. I think Gronk, after taking some time off, should be healthy going into the season this year. Even if he doesn't play every snap, he still has that rapport with Brady. There's still a chance that Gronk could score 8, 10, 12 touchdowns, something of that nature in the red zone and be a monster. So I'm still thinking that Gronk could be a good tight end fantasy option. We'll have to see, but I do still think he can be a great option. And honestly, I might try and snag him in a few of my leagues late just to see. He's probably the best tight end of all time, and even with the injury history, and even though he might not play that many snaps, it's definitely worth taking a chance on a guy who is the best tight end of all time and is back with his quarterback. Hayden Hurst steps into the Austin Hooper role now in Atlanta. He could see a ton of targets from Matt Ryan. The only uncertainty here is changing teams. He has to learn a new offense. But he should be a decent tight end option this year. He should be a solid option. You have Matt Ryan. You have an upgraded offensive line. You have Calvin Ridley, Julio Jones taking some pressure off of him. You could see Hayden Hurst be a solid fantasy option this year. And then Tyler Higbee, who I'm not that high on. Tyler Higbee was a breakout last year at the end of the year, but that was right after Gerald Everett got hurt. Gerald Everett got injured at the end of the year. You saw Tyler Higbee be the starting tight end. He got all the snaps at tight end. You saw him have big weeks. But until Gerald Everett got injured, we haven't really seen anything in Higbee's entire career that would indicate that he is going to be a solid fantasy option with Gerald Everett on the field. So I have him ranked low. I still have him in this tier 3 because he should at least... So last year we saw the Rams go more towards 12 personnel, which is 2 tight ends, 2 receivers, and 1 running back, instead of their normal 3 wide receiver sets. So we saw them have Cooper Kupp, Robert Woods on the field more often, and we saw more 2 tight end sets. And if the Rams go to more 2 tight end sets because they have a bad offensive line, they want to have 2 tight ends on the field to block. They want those guys out there blocking. We could still see Higbee have a solid role in this offense, but with Gerald Everett healthy, I don't see much upside for Higbee at all. So breaking off, we're going into the tier 4 tight ends. So tier 4 are all my breakout tight end guys. So starting off this tier is Mike Gesicki from the Dolphins. Mike Gesicki is my number 1 favorite tight end breakout this year. I'm trying to draft him in every single league I'll reach to get him. Mike Gesicki is my tight end breakout guy this year. I'm all over Mike Gesicki this season. It's his 3rd year. Tight end, 3rd year breakout. It's a big thing in fantasy football. He's been acclimated to the league now. You saw him have some good weeks last year. The Dolphins upgraded their offensive line. They still have Fitzpatrick, who's going to sling the ball into traffic. Tua Tagovailoa, he's there now, so no matter what, you're going to have a solid quarterback option for Gesicki this season. And last year you saw Preston Williams go down with an ACL tear, so he's coming off an ACL tear. You have Albert Wilson, who opted out, Allen Hurns, who opted out. So now the only passing options for Fitzpatrick right now are Parker and Mike Gesicki. Those are the only guys he can trust right now. Fitzpatrick or Tua, those are the options. So with all those guys opting out and injured, Mike Gesicki is basically the number 2 option in Miami right now, the number 2 receiving option, and he's one of the most athletic tight ends we've ever seen come out of the NFL Combine, come out of college. He has one of the best athletic profiles we've ever seen. Gesicki is my tight end breakout this year. And so is the next guy, TJ Hockenson. TJ Hockenson was a top 10 overall pick in the NFL draft. Don't forget that. Don't forget that draft capital. Matt Stafford isn't afraid to throw the ball around, throw it into traffic. Hockenson has an amazing profile as well. And like I just said, with the 3rd year tight end breakouts, TJ Hockenson had a huge game in his first season in the NFL. So if he comes into the NFL and has a huge game, his first ever game, he was injured last year. Now, what's he going to do this year in his 2nd year now that he's played in the NFL for half of 3/4 of a season because he was injured a little bit last year. But now he has a little bit more NFL experience, and with that top 10 overall draft capital, he could break out this year too. We have Jonnu Smith. So the only receiving options in Tennessee right now are A.J. Brown and Corey Davis. There's no number 3 wide receiver consequence there. There's really no satellite 3rd down receiving back. They're just going to feed Derrick Henry on the ground. We've seen that they don't really give the ball to Derrick Henry in the air. So Jonnu Smith is kind of that third receiving option there. Dallas Goedert I have in this tier. Noah Fant, Blake Jarwin, Ian Thomas. So Goddard, I love Dallas Goedert. He's stuck behind Zach Ertz right now, but I think even with Ertz on the field, you're still going to see Goddard have some big weeks. Noah Fant, he's super athletic, also one of the most athletic tight ends we've ever seen. Also has that first-round draft capital, had some big weeks last year. Now they have weapons in Denver kind of taking some pressure, taking that pressure off of Noah Fant. So now guys are going to be spreading the field, taking safeties and corners away, leaving some open areas for Fant to use his athleticism. Blake Jarwin now the starting tight end for the Cowboys. No one else is there. Blake Jarwin is the only tight end there. You have CeeDee Lamb, Michael Gallup, and Amari Cooper taking those corners and safeties away. There's going to be a ton of open area for Blake Jarwin. Like I said in my quarterback podcast last time, you saw in 2019 you saw the Cowboys look more towards passing the ball instead of running the ball, handing off to Zeke. You saw them passing more with Dak. They want to put the ball in Dak's hands and pass the ball down the field. And Blake Jarwin, if he's on the field every snap, he's the starting tight end. He could have a huge season this year. And then Ian Thomas, when he finally got the opportunity to start, he's extremely athletic as well. When you finally got to see him start at the end of the season last year, he had 1 week, 5 receptions, 50 yards, and a touchdown or two. And you could see him finally step up with Greg Olsen out of Carolina. You could see him step up. He was a third-round draft pick, so that's pretty high draft capital. You could see him step up and be a solid fantasy option this year as well. So after that, it's another tier break, and this is tier 5 going into. Tier 5 is kind of just unproven young guys or veterans that we're really not excited about. And there's one exception on this list, which I will tell you about when I get there. So Greg Olsen, Gerald Everett, Jack Doyle, Dawson Knox, and Dawson Knox is kind of the exception here. I'm not ready to put Dawson Knox into the breakout candidate yet. This year, the Bills added Stephon Diggs. They have John Brown. They have Cole Beasley. There's kind of some weapons there. I don't see the Bills being a pass-heavy team. They're still a run-heavy team. I don't see many targets going Knox's way right now. Maybe in the future, Dawson Knox has a great profile too. Athletically, he's an athletic tight end. He did make some big plays happen this year. I just don't know if the targets are going to be there to be a kind of reliable fantasy option. But I do think in the future, Dawson Knox should enter that breakout tight end candidate, maybe next season, but not this season. And that's why he's kind of in this tier. So we have Olsen, Everett, Jack Doyle, Dawson Knox, Eric Ebron, Chris Herndon, Irv Smith Jr., O.J. Howard, Darren Fells, Jimmy Graham, Jay Sternberger, Kyle Rudolph, David Njoku. So just to highlight some guys this year, just to highlight some guys in this tier, we saw Chris Herndon kind of have a decent freshman rookie season with Sam Darnold. He was suspended and injured all of last year. If he is back and healthy this year, he could have a breakout season this year. Herndon could have a breakout year with Sam Darnold. We could see Irv Smith have a breakout year and kind of overtake Kyle Rudolph there in Minnesota, the extremely athletic tight end from Alabama. Now you only have it's just Adam Thielen and it's the rookie Justin Jefferson from LSU, and then there's not much else after that. So you could see Irv Smith step up into a huge role. O.J. Howard, he's like I said about Gronk, he's probably not going to be on the field all the time, but O.J. Howard is still going to get snaps. Darren Fells, not excited about. Jimmy Graham, not excited about. Jay Sternberger could be the starting tight end for Aaron Rodgers this year. There is plenty of potential there. We'll have to see the first couple weeks if that connection is established. And then Kyle Rudolph, David Njoku. I still like David Njoku as a fantasy option. He's extremely athletic as well. I hope you're noticing a trend with all these potential breakout and solid tight end candidates. They're all extremely athletic. They all have good athletic testing numbers. And I still like David Njoku in the long term, but this year with Austin Hooper there, he really doesn't have much value unless he gets traded or Austin Hooper goes down with an injury. And then after Njoku, we have a tier break to tier 6, which are the last of my tight ends. So we have guys that are like second or third on the depth chart, guys that we're really not excited about at all. Just not really reliable options, probably not even guys that you're drafting. So to start that off, and I just want to say to start off this tier 6, it's the 33rd ranked tight end. So Greg Olsen last tier was the 20th ranked tight end. Greg Olsen is he's probably going to be the starting tight end for Russell Wilson now. And any starting tight end for Russell Wilson has shown to be valuable in the past in fantasy football. So Olsen was at 20, and then that goes to David Njoku at 32. Tier 6. So Tier 6 starts at rank 33 with Will Dissly and ends at 50 with Albert O from Denver. And in between here, we have Dissly and Hollister back-to-back. Just in case Greg Olsen gets injured again, we have Dissly and Hollister. We have C.J. Uzomah, Tyler Eifert. Tyler Eifert is actually the starting tight end for Jacksonville right now. Josh Oliver, their young tight end that they drafted last season. I think they said he's out for the year or he's injured now. So Eifert is actually the starter in Jacksonville. We have Vance McDonald, who's is at least the backup. We're going to split time with Ebron. Trey Burton's in Indy now. Ryan Griffin likely going to be behind Chris Herndon, Jeremy Sprinkle. Starting tight end for Washington could be some fantasy value there, but I have him ranked pretty low because I don't expect much. Drew Sample. So Drew Sample and C.J. Uzomah could battle it out to see who's the starting tight end in Cincinnati with Joe Burrow now. So Uzomah, we've seen him have some decent fantasy weeks in the past when he's the starter. Drew Sample has second-round draft capital, so we'll have to see who ends up being the starter and getting the snaps there. Nick Boyle, like I said, in Baltimore. Devin Asiasi in New England. Adam Troutman in New Orleans. Dan Arnold. Dan Arnold could be a breakout tight end. He could push for the starting role for the Cardinals this year in the Arizona Cardinals offense. Foster Moreau in Oakland, Las Vegas Raiders now. Josh Oliver, who I now need to take off the tight end rankings because I think he's injured or out for the season. Dalton Keene in New England. Ricky Seals-Jones. And I got to see what team Ricky Seals-Jones is on now. I looked it up when I put him in the rankings. Oh, Ricky Seals-Jones is on the Chiefs now. So if Travis Kelce were to ever get injured and Ricky Seals-Jones was the starter in Kansas City, he would be obviously extremely fantasy relevant. That's why he's in my top 50. And then 50 is Albert O from Denver. He's going to be a rookie, extremely athletic, though. He's massive and fast for being massive. So he's going to round out my top 50 there. So this last tier is kind of just guys that really don't have any standalone value. Could be fantasy options if we see them be the starter, if we see them getting snaps, if we see them getting targets, but not really guys we're worried about or drafting right now. Maybe just these 33 to 50 guys are guys you're keeping an eye out for. So those are my tight end rankings and tiers. Hope you enjoyed this episode. Hope you take this into your draft going forward in the next week or two. I will be back as soon as I can with the running backs and wide receivers. Like I said, please follow me on Twitter. Please subscribe on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, YouTube, and have a great day, everyone. Hope you enjoyed the tight end rankings and tiers.